In this lecture, we're going to talk about HD subdivision levels. HD subdivision levels allow you to divide meshes up to 1 billion polygons in ZBrush. You heard that correctly. It allows an enormous amount of geometry resolution. That's why they're called HD subdivision levels, but they're a little different from the normal subdivision levels. You can't see all 1 billion polygons rendered at the same time in real time moving around. You can render them, but you can't actually sculpt on all of them at the same time. So there's a few adjustments to your workflow that you have to do, but this is an extremely powerful tool. So I've opened up the Hellhound model that we created with multiple UDIMs in our UV mapping chapter. So that's important because if I've got a Z tool that has 1 billion polygons and I sculpt all that detail into it, if I'm only working with one 8K map, there's no way to get all that detail into that map. Those millions of polygons go completely, without use. So you must extract that detail into multiple UDIMs for that to be worthwhile at all. Or if you just want to render directly inside of ZBrush, if you're just creating concept imagery or illustrations, then absolutely you can use HD subdivision levels and just render directly inside of ZBrush. But if you're trying to use this in a pipeline situation, you're definitely going to want to have your multiple UDIMs. And just to illustrate what I mean by that, if I take this tool and open up the Z plugin palette and open up UV Master and just click Flatten. Oh, we have to click Work on Clone. Click Work on Clone. That'll clone a copy of the mesh at its lowest subdivision level, and then flatten. Here you can see what I mean. Our UV regions are laid out from 1001 to 1010. So we have multiple UV regions. So each one of these can be its own texture map. That's the purpose of UDIMs. If you have not watched the video on UV mapping and you're not familiar with this concept, I encourage you to go check that out, and it will hopefully make a lot more sense to you. It's really an important concept to understand if you want to be working in a film or game pipeline. So here we've got our Hellhound at the highest subdivision level. We have 6 subdivision levels and we have 11 million polygons. So let's say I want to zoom in here and I want to do some painting. It's much easier to see this sort of resolution with painting. I'll take the standard brush, dot stroke, and I'll just use alpha 1. Turn on RGB and turn off Z-add, and we'll just select a color that'll be very easy to see, like this red. Now if I turn my brush size down really low and start painting, you see I start to get jaggies or aliasing on my stroke. That's about as small as I can get my brush stroke. Now, if I wanted to do very, very fine detailing on something, if we were going to get very, very close to this character, that wouldn't be ideal. We want to get much, much finer than that. So I could continue to divide, but we will run up against the limits of physical memory in ZBrush. The other option is to use HD subdivision levels. Now, HD subdivision levels you can add on top of your standard subdivision levels. So under geometry, you find your standard subdivision levels. If we close that window and then come down here under the tool menu, we have Geometry HD. This is where we find our HD subdivision levels. So if I divide, and I'm at my highest standard subdivision level now, if I divide, you see it's now 45 million polygons. Divide again. Now we start to get a slider. Here we can see our 2 subdivision levels. I'm at 183.29 million polygons. So now we want to sculpt in this. Now I can't just start sculpting and painting. We're not actually sculpting or painting into HD. What we need to do is, and I will turn on X symmetry, so we're working on both sides. I'll snap to a side view, maybe turn off perspective, and then I will mouse over the area that I want to work on, and I will press the A key. That's A as in apple. And what that will do, it tells ZBrush that I want to start working in my HD subdivision levels. So ZBrush will calculate the maximum number of faces from those HD subdivision levels that it can show you, and it will then display them as a radial region. As you see, I've got a radial region turned on here. So if we look here, let's turn on frame mode and see if we can't spot the edge of our region. There it is right there. That's the edge of our region. That's our radial region that we're able to work in. That's the maximum number of polygons that ZBrush is allowed to show us. I can't sculpt or paint outside of that area, but if we zoom back in here where we were working before, and then take that same stroke and draw that along here, look how much finer, look how much tighter that brush stroke is. We can get very, very small here. Let's take our draw size and turn it way down. Let's take it all the way down to 1. And I'm just using my Wacom pen. You see I get very, very fine lines here. We can make tiny little veining. And this sort of detail is important if you're going to be really, really close to a creature, or perhaps the creature is gigantic, like Kaiju in Pacific Rim 2. They were gigantic, and so there needs to be an enormous amount of detail in a mesh like that. And this is a good option, using HD subdivision levels inside of ZBrush to facilitate that level of detail, which otherwise you just couldn't get. So I'm just going to create some little mottling patterns, just some squiggling here. Okay. Now I'm going to press F for focus, and that'll bring me back out to focus on the HD region. And we'll zoom out a little bit more. Let's say I want to do some sculpting. I'll turn on Z-Add on my brush, turn off RGB, and let's just rotate around to a different area here. Let's zoom in right here. So I'll zoom right in, and we'll get really tiny here. Maybe we'll change to a drag rectangle stroke, and we'll change to the vein alpha. And I want to get a lot closer than this, so I'll zoom in really tight. Now, if I click and drag, look at the fidelity of that alpha. We get so much detail. I can drag this up bigger, and that's still going to be much, much better than I could have gotten with a standard subdivision level, because again, we've got millions and millions of polygons that we're working with right now. And these exist. These do exist. It's not a trick of pixels. It's just because of the limitations of the ability to render polygons in the graphics library. You can only render, I can't remember what the top end limit of it is, but we haven't hit that yet. But 1 billion polygons is not possible to render and rotate around in real time while you're sculpting. So the region is how ZBrush gets around that. So now I'm going to drop out of my HD sculpting mode. You see I can't access the subdivision slider there or anything. I can just sculpt and paint right now. If I want to leave subdivision sculpting mode, I'm going to hold my mouse cursor over here on the background, and then I will press the A key again. And when I do that, I want you to watch the detail here and here and see what happens. It will appear that it disappears. It doesn't. It's still there. It's just we've left HD mode, so it's dropped back down to our highest standard subdivision level, which doesn't have enough geometry to represent that at such high quality. It's not lost. If we enter back into our standard subdivisions, we'll be able to see it just fine. So there we go. Actually, it didn't go quite as bad as I expected it to, but here if we zoom in, you see we don't have, especially our fine little veining here, that's completely gone. If I mouse over this area and press the A key again and enter back into HD subdivision level mode, you'll notice that our HD subdivision level slider will go away, and then this will snap right back into that nice high frequency, high resolution detail. There you go. Now you see that it's come back. So when you leave HD mode, you're not losing any detail. You're not losing anything. It's just stopped displaying those polygons in high definition. So I'll press the A key again on the background. Now, the more HD subdivision levels I add, the smaller the resulting region's going to be, but the finer and finer detail we'll be able to get. So we can get down to a very, very granular level and really start to sculpt some very, very fine details here. Let's add another HD level. We are now 733 million polygons. There we go. Let's mouse over here, and then we'll press the A key here. And you'll see that our region this time will be smaller. There we go. Now you see that we are in HD mode. If we go into frame, you see that our region is much, much, much smaller. Shift F to get out of frame mode. And then we'll just zoom back into that area. We'll get really, really tight in on that. So this is the last one that we did here. Let's zoom in even smaller. And let's look at the type of detail we can get. We'll go to the dot stroke and alpha 1 and just do some fine sculpting strokes here. There we go. Look at that. Look at that very, very fine sculpting stroke that we're able to accomplish. If I go into frame mode, Shift F, you'll see these exist. Here we go. And we can use alphas. We can use all the same sculpting techniques that we use inside of ZBrush in normal standard subdivisions. It's no different. It's just giving us access to infinitely more resolution. So again, it's just an incredibly powerful tool. I want to point out that here we've got the Sculpt HD button. This is the button that we're using the A hotkey for. If I press this button, we'll exit out of HD mode. So if I'm zoomed in like this and I can't get my cursor over onto the background easily, we can always just press that button to leave HD mode. So watch what happens here when we drop out of HD. There you go. We lose that appearance, but it's still there. It's just in the HD levels. So as I was saying, you need to be able to capture this level of detail in maps that can represent it. If you want to render this in ZBrush in HD, it's very, very simple. All you have to do is position your character however you want to render it, and then instead of pressing the A key while you're moused over the object, come over here on the background and press the A key while you're moused over the background, and that will render your entire creature using HD subdivision levels. So you can view all of your painting and sculpting together like this. You watch that it's rendering out each one of those tiles, and eventually it will complete making the image. So you are able to render it in ZBrush and see all of this detail together. And it's wonderful for being able to take screenshots of your work and share that with an art director or director, being able to, for people to see the progress on what you're working on, and for yourself just to be able to see everything together, because it's not really nice to have to paint or sculpt without being able to see the gestalt or the whole. And this allows you to do a render and see what everything looks like together. It's kind of interesting to watch each one of those tiles fill in as it renders. Watching the character kind of grow in space. There we go. It's building that arm now, and there we go. You can see it is just about complete, and there you are. And my autosave pops up. The autosave will go away here in a moment. And that incorporates our HD. So if I just move, it will drop away. It goes away. If we go to the rendering menu here and open up render properties, if we're going to do a BPR render, we want to make sure that we render our HD subdivision levels as well. And so that's going to be HD geometry right there. So if we turn that on, when we do a BPR render, it will actually render our HD subdivision levels. Now, this will work, HD subdivision levels will work with other texturing tools inside of ZBrush, including Spotlight. So if I go to my texture menu here and I grab this image of a cuttlefish that I have, and we'll just pop that into a Spotlight like this. This is quite a high resolution image of a cuttlefish. There's a little bit of specular on there. It hasn't been polarized, but I've got some nice details here. So I'm going to press Shift-Z to turn off Spotlight. Now, if you don't understand how to use Spotlight yet, there is a video that talks entirely about Spotlight texturing, and you are going to learn that in that video. So don't worry if you don't understand it in this video. I just want to illustrate that the other texturing tools do function along with HD levels. So let's mouse over the head here and just press the A key. Whatever area I'm moused over will establish what the center of my sculpting region is going to be. So here you go. It says my high def mesh is ready. You can see the border right there. Let's go ahead and zero in on this. I'm going to change my material really quickly. I'm going to change from the skin shader to the basic material 2. And I'm going to go to my material settings, Let's turn this up, turn my specular curve out a little bit, and let's turn our wax modifier up just a bit. And I'm going to go to my lighting menu. While I'm texturing, I like to have even lighting, so I'm going to turn on the secondary light, and I'll set the color back to white. We talk about all this in our texturing video. In case you're not familiar with what I'm doing here, fear not, we talk about it in detail. There we go. I just want to get a nice even lighting on this area that I'm going to be projecting texture onto. So I will press the Z key to bring up my spotlight, and I'll just rotate the spotlight image. Bring it down here. Maybe we'll scale it down a little bit. Since we're in HD, let's really zoom into this, and let's get this texture detail right down the center of the head here. So press the Z key again, and we'll do it at about like this. That's good. It's quite small. Let's turn down our opacity so we can see the placement. Put it about here. All right, so I'll go ahead and turn up my spotlight radius and then press the Z key so I'm actually painting. And I am going to turn off my X symmetry. Double check. Yeah, I'm going to turn off my X symmetry with the X hotkey, and I want to make sure that I've got RGB turned on and Z add turned off. So I'm only painting right now. So if I click and drag, I'm going to start painting. Oh, and I'm on drag rectangle strokes. Let's go to the dot stroke, and we can turn the alpha off. So now I'm just going to be projecting RGB. Oh, my brush size is turned way down. Make sure our brush size is bigger than 1 pixel. There we go. Now we're getting this very nice fidelity painting in here. Press the Z key, and maybe I want to move this texture a little bit up and continue that. Maybe we want to move this over just a little bit here. Paint it over here. And maybe we want to flip it across the horizontal axis. So we'll flip it this way. I'm going to turn up my opacity so I can see it a bit better. That was the wrong axis to flip it in. We'll have to actually flip it vertically. There we go. And we'll position that. Let's turn our opacity down so we can see it on the model. Bring it over here, and then press the Z key, and we'll start painting through that. Now press Shift-Z to exit out of Spotlight. And this is in the Polypaint. This has just been projected into the Polypaint there. Now I will exit out of Sculpt HD mode. Sculpt HD is Paint HD. It's both sculpting and painting. And you see that it is actually applied to the mesh just like it would under normal subdivision levels. So just because you're using HD doesn't mean that you can't use Spotlight or any of the other texturing and sculpting tools inside of ZBrush. They will all apply. So now you can see we lost a fair bit of that detail and the fidelity in those striping, the striping patterns there. I mean, we can get really quite small, as you saw before. If we zoom down in here, and let's press the A key. So we're going to paint into this region. So watch this area here. That area will jump up in fidelity as soon as the HD levels are ready. And there we go. So I will press the Z key to bring up the spotlight once again. Bring the spotlight over here. We'll turn this down really small. Press the Z key. We'll turn my draw size down, and then get this. Well, let's turn it down even smaller than that. What do you say? Let's undo that. And press the Z key. Let's turn this way down. There we go. Shift-Z will turn off Spotlight, and then press the Z key or Sculpt HD to drop out of HD subdivision mode, and you'll see that we drop down in quality, but that RGB data, that Polypaint data, is definitely still there. It just lives in the HD levels. And there we go. So how do we capture this in maps? As I was saying before, you need to break out your UVs across multiple UDIMs, so you're capturing this detail in multiple UV maps. Otherwise, you're going to try and capture all this detail in one 8K map or maybe higher, and that's just not going to be enough, and it's not going to be efficient. Luckily, that's very, very simple. As long as you follow the instructions that are laid out in the UV master video, where we talk about UVs in ZBrush, where you can bring in UVs from outside of ZBrush or generate them here and lay out your UVs across multiple UDIMs, you can go to the Multimap Exporter plugin. Multimap Exporter is here. Now we have an entire video that talks about using Multimap Exporter. Suffice to say, in this video, I just want to point out that this is the only thing in ZBrush that will actually read multiple UDIMs and write maps out for each one. So you are capable of extracting all that color information out of your HD levels into those maps. Also, Multimap Exporter will read HD subdivision levels. So your texture maps that are generated in here, texture from PolyPaint, that will include the HD details, as well as displacement. That will also include HD details. So it's very simple. You just set this up like you were extracting normal maps into regular geometry, generate your maps, and it's going to extract that detail that's in the HD subdivision levels. All you need to do is make sure that you have the space to carry all that data, and you do that by using multiple UDIMs or multiple UV regions. So that concludes this look at HD subdivision levels. I hope you found this helpful. I think they're a very, very powerful tool, and they open up an enormous amount of possibilities with just the sheer density of detail that you're able to then add to your creatures and characters inside of ZBrush. So thank you for watching, and I'll see you in the next video.